Who are the free agents on our wish list? Doug and I go back and forth on some of the most valuable players out there on the market. Plus, we profile Nick Richards today on Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast, and that includes YouTube. There's Doug threatening you to listen every day. Everyhornetsboxscore.com. That's where you can catch his substack. Stop scaring the people watching YouTube. We're trying to drive people here, and then you're just going to drive them away to go back to our Audible platform.
Sometimes you have to use fear. That's a dad tip. You know, not too much fear. You don't want to traumatize anyone, but sometimes, threats work. Not threats of harm, but threats of, maybe you take something away, maybe threaten you don't threaten harm on the child, you threaten harm to the things they love, like Bluey.
That he's gonna die if you don't clean your room. He's gonna die. It reminds me of my persuasion class where we discussed whether fear was technically persuasion, and there were different schools of thought on that. Anyways, I'm Walker Mail. You can listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. WFNZ.com, anywhere you get your pods. Also, this episode, it is brought to you by Prize Picks. We appreciate them as always. The easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use code, all lowercase, LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. These NBA free agents, they're going to be making a little more than $100 though here, Doug. And I'm trying to figure out how much we want the Hornets to spend on some of these guys. We're actually going to the Sicko Satchel here for a free agent question, correct? This is not our own doing. We are outsourcing our work here to help us with some content during silly season, and somebody came through for us.
That's right. Cole asks on YouTube, who's a dream free agent target and a realistic free agent target for each of you this offseason? Thank you, Cole.
Okay, dream. So we can do the whole, what would you do if you won the lottery scenario with our dream free agent?
Mm-hmm. Right, okay. Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, this is who we take everything out. We take the Charlotte factor out. We take the fit factor out, honestly. Maybe a dream would be a dream fit. I don't know. Or you just say, look, this is the player that I want on the Charlotte Hornets.
Yeah, I think I'm going to bake in just maybe 2 percentage points worth of realistically happening.
Okay.
I'll go Paul George. Paul George is my dream scenario. Watching he and Brandon Miller both pair up with one another. It's the fact that you have another big wing. I think Paul George coming over to the Hornets, being the vet that helps him out, but also maybe able to age gracefully. I think you can house 3 20-point per game scores within those guys. I think they would all tickle that number this year. Ooh. So if you have LaMelo handling the basketball, Brandon Miller starting to blossom, and then you also have Paul George that's here for a couple of seasons or whatever, I think that would be the dream scenario, but ultimately I don't think that's going to happen because he wants to go compete. Philadelphia, whoever else would be in the mix. I'll stop there. Give me your dream scenario before we go more realistic.
Well, Paul George is my pipe dream scenario because I just don't think that there is any chance of that happening. If I went to a dream scenario that I thought had a minuscule chance of happening, it would be that OG Anunoby rejects his player offer that he has for near $20 million with the Knicks and becomes an unrestricted free agent, at which point the Hornets swoop in and give him all the money to be the 3 to Brandon Miller's 2. And then you're sizing up, you are getting somebody who, look, playoffs, there were some durability issues, but everybody in the NBA has durability issues. I think that's the weird thing. Obviously, we're traumatized by the past couple of seasons where every single Hornet that mattered was hurt at some point for some extended period of time. So I think we're naturally going to question durability issues with so many of these free agents or trade targets or draft picks. But it's look, man, you got to just roll the dice and hope that all the medicals come back clean and pray. I mean, that's really all you can do.
you talk about a dream. He was a dream for the Knicks, man. And I know you had the tough decision on what to do with RJ Barrett and Emmanuel quickly. He was a real loss for them, but Anunoby came in, and when he was healthy, when he was on the court, he made such a difference at shooting around 39% from three and being one of the best defenders in the NBA. It just, you're right. Like that would be such a good one. So the wish would be that he opts out because he thinks he's going to get so much more money because of how well he played on a contender. But he would opt in, you would think, because maybe he would be fearful of losing money because of the injury.
And what's cool about him in particular, even versus Paul George, and this is going to sound weird, but like OG Anunoby, not really a playmaker. Like his assist percentage last season was 5.7%. That's 13th percentile. Whereas Paul George is the one of the better playmakers at his position in the league. He can find other people. Why I say that would actually be a good thing in this dream scenario is that it allows Brandon Miller to continue to develop. It doesn't take those opportunities away from him. So you've got OG Anunoby on the wing focusing on locking down as a defender, and then scoring on the other end, and Brandon and LaMelo, facilitating most of those playmaking duties. So, yeah, I mean, again, very small. We're talking dream scenarios here. Very small percentage chance of that happening. But, that would be an amazing fit.
We both win big wings, Doug.
Because that's the big need. Yeah. That's the huge need right now.
We both went guys that can defend really well at their position. We went guys that can play the small forward spot. Brandon Miller still stays at that too in the backcourt with LaMelo. Both of the players that we picked. And then if you wanted to go ultimate pipe dream scenario, LeBron James is out there on the market.
Who?
And maybe the realistic way that happens is the Bronny James avenue. Even if Bronny is only working out for Phoenix and LA, maybe that would be the avenue. But yeah, the big wings, they're the most valuable archetype for a reason. And we want one. We want another one because we already have some size as the length goes, not the beef, but we got the length with LaMelo and Brandon, and now we just want another one. We're getting greedy with those guys.
Well, I've seen Bronny projected, and I've got a mock draft coming up later. We'll see where Jonathan Wasserman of Bleacher Report has Bronny going. I don't think he goes in the first round. I think he goes in the second round. And so people keep asking me, should the Charlotte Hornets, use that second round pick, early-ish second round pick, in order to get Bronny James? And my thing is, I almost want them to just trick LA or trick Phoenix into thinking they're going to make that pick, and then, make the sixth pick and go for your long-term planning, and then get some assets via your early second-round pick and really get in there and make Rich Paul and LeBron James think that Bronny James is going to the Charlotte Hornets. That would be amazing.
Last question before we move on to the next segment and talk about our realistic options that we actually think could happen. Here we are valuing the big wing, and I'm imagining Hornets fans thinking, hey, okay, why not bring back Miles Bridges then? Isn't he big? Isn't he bringing the beef that you want? And no, he's not, I think, as tall as Paul George. I think he maybe a little bit shorter than OG. I can look at the heights, though. But granted, right, also a bigger wing, and he does have the size and the weight. So, Doug, why don't we just go back to bringing back the guy that did average 20 points per game? Off court stuff, if that's the reason, then well justified. But if we're just looking at basketball reasons, as that's what basketball teams are going to be basing their decision off of, then do those people have a point that might bring back Miles Bridges?
Oh, of course they do. I mean, and I don't think either of us have really said otherwise through this whole process. And in fact, I'll just go ahead and say it now. I'll give you some other realistic options after the break, but like Miles Bridges is the realistic option for one of the major needs that this team has, which is wing D. It's just you're going to be paying a lot of money for a lot more question marks than you would be for OG Anunoby at 27. Paul George, you're going to be paying all that money, and this guy's 2-3 seasons from retirement, but maybe longer. We'll see. But OG, that's a young guy that you could invest in long term. So that's really what it's all about. It's just about how much money do you want to pay for how much question marks. Miles Bridges offers more of those, and I think OG is a better defender. I think OG
hell yeah, he is.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
that's the real answer. It's because both of them are a lot better defenders than Miles, and they're better 3-point shooters. They're high level 3-and-D guys, where Paul George is just a flat out stud, and OG is an elite defender who's also shooting a lot better from three the last few seasons. Like that's really kind of the answer here. Like I just imagine the Hornets fans saying, well, Miles is a big wing, and that's true, but we're talking about different tiers here. Like, I hope people can realize that.
Yeah, and I wonder too, once Miles gets paid, once he does finally, because it has been obviously interrupted by the felony domestic violence charges and everything that happened after that, once he does finally get paid, can he then focus on, all right, I need to focus on these one or two things, whether it's becoming a better three-point shooter and being a better defender, as opposed to trying to, what I think he's been doing over the past this past season, and then what he was working on when he was working on getting the extension in the first place, was showcasing this sort of super wing full game. I can do it in the mid-range. I can do it from outside. I can do it inside. Hopefully after the dust settles and he's got his sort of 3-4 year outlook, he can focus on what he needs to do to be the best Charlotte Hornet, Detroit Piston, Indiana Pacer, as opposed to getting ready to get paid.
We can finish some of those thoughts and look at realistic options coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
Doug has an extensive list of free agents, and I mean extensive. He has quite a few on the list, and he has them broken down in different categories. It's real reminiscent of my top 35 Hornets list, except now it's just 2024 free agents. Stick around and find out what that list looks like on the other side. Before we do that, I want to tell you this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. It's America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members, and it's the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less than on 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. That's it. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with basketball, hockey, and college basketball entries today on Prize Picks. I guess not today for college basketball, but there's plenty of sports that are offered here on Prize Picks. Someday that person could be you that picks college basketball games and ends up winning on them. America's #1 fantasy sports app, that is Prize Picks, and they have something for every sports fan, from basketball and hockey to League of Legends, even everything in between. You could pick LeBron, Caitlin Clark, Connor McDavid, and Jude Bellingham, all in the same entry. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. More Locked On Hornets ahead. I got a couple more thoughts on Miles real quickly, because it's going to be the biggest question, right? Number 1 priority for Jeff Peterson is figuring out what you're going to do, because even if chronologically that's not how it plays out, the first thing you figure out is who the 6th overall pick is going to be, and maybe long term that's more important, right? Maybe it's 1A and 1B what we're talking about. I just think you have a good idea on what's going to happen with Miles. And I think that's going to dictate your other decisions, because there's so much money tied up into it. And if you sign this guy for what another team is going to pay him, $20 million or more, that means he's a big part of your team. So you have to decide that. That's why we're talking about it so much. And when we go to these other pipe dreams or maybe just out of reach, but if we extend our arms a little bit more, maybe we could reach this guy. We're going to those free agents, because if we envision the role that we want Miles to play, then that's also the third option, right? Because we want him to be third, past LaMelo, past Brandon Miller. And the defensive Miles last year with the inefficient numbers, it's that he didn't get to play the role that he was supposed to. Mm-hmm. And that was true for a lot of players the last couple of years because of all of the injuries. Even so, if we want Miles to play the role he's supposed to, and we're going to give him a lot of money to play it, then wouldn't we just want somebody that's going to play that role a lot better? And I think OG Anunoby, with him shooting threes as well as he does consistently, right? We know he's got a good 3-point shot. We know defensively, man, very good on that end too. I'm willing to pay extra money for that if he's going to play that role and just be better at it. And then the Paul George thing, like Paul George, self-explanatory. The defense against that is that he's too old and you don't want to tie that much money in it. But fair enough. But the OG thing, yeah, that's why it's the pipe dream, despite having a similar build out there on the wing.
Yeah, in terms of timeline of this franchise actually competing, OG would fit more than a Paul George. You would have to be going after it immediately. Do you have the resources? Do you have the talent on your squad right now to support that? Probably not. With Bridges, though, the factor is he does – again, I don't think he's going to really give them a break on the contract talks, but he does like the franchise. Yeah. He does appreciate that they stood by him, whatever you think about that. He appreciates that the franchise stuck by him through all of that controversy. So the Hornets have an advantage in adding his level of talent where they don't – well, first of all, they would have to have OG opt out of his contract and want to entertain an audience with a Hornets team that is not at this moment ready to compete. And if you add OG, they're still not ready to compete. They've got to add OG and a couple of things have to happen, right? And so that's the difficulty when we're talking about free agency. It's not, to me, it's never been about, these guys don't want to come to Charlotte. No, it's these guys don't want to come to the Hornets because the Hornets have been, as a franchise, they've been viewed as cheap. They've been viewed, and not just cheap in the sense of like spending on players, but spending on hotels, spending on accommodations, spending on practice facility. The organization has to turn that reputation around so that you can get an audience with some of these players that they probably haven't been able to get an audience with. You can get an audience with Miles Bridges in free agency. It's an opportunity to add talent at such a level. Obviously, you would want someone that is more efficient, but sometimes you have to, in order to add enough talent to support the development of Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball, you have to look at what is realistic, and that's what we're doing in this segment, talking about realistic options.
LaMelo, Brandon, OG, Mark, all healthy. I know we'd have to add more talent, but buddy, that would have me as excited going into a season as I've been in a long time. Okay, we spent a lot of time talking about guys that aren't going to come here and leave big markets like LA and New York to come to the Hornets. So let's talk about the realistic options here. Doug, let's go through your list because you have an extensive one.
Well, let's stay with wing defense. And there are two players, both with options, so you would have to figure that out. They're not going to be immediately available in this free agency period. But I'm going to go to the right twin first and talk about Caleb Martin, who has a player option available to him if he wants to stay in Miami and see what's going on there, although Miami looks a little tenuous. Are they going to bring back Jimmy Butler? What's going on there? Jimmy Butler seems like he wants a big deal somewhere. And so Caleb Martin, what if he wants to come back, play with his bro again? And it's not even the same regime, so they wouldn't even have to do a Presty oopsie and say, my bad for letting you go. It's a whole new crew. I think it would be a perfect scenario to bring back the right twin.
Caleb Martin and Cody back together. I like it. Are we using Miami as our developmental system, and then he just comes back? And
they've been using us for years, so I would love that. Yeah, I would love to flip. We've already started to flip scripts. I think we continue to flip scripts. Another name I'll give you for wing defense is Jayshawn Tate. He has a club option, but Houston seems like they've been on the want to move on from Tate train, and it seems like they're moving in a slightly different direction there because they've got some stacking issues there at his position. So if they deny that club option, I think Jayshawn Tate would also be a good ad there. Realistically.
And remember, we talked about him on the trade market when there was I think it was PJ Washington, Houston interest. I think that was the player. Mm-hmm. We discussed Jayshawn Tate as a guy that could come over amongst some.
So it could be a sign, and there's a sign and trade option, availability there too if Houston wants to work something out.
Okay, so we talked about this one with David. Tobias Harris is interesting. Like, I feel so dirty saying it. It feels weird. I know the stigma surrounding him, and it's deserved. Because
can it be a backup plan? Let me ask you that. Can it be a backup plan? If things fall apart with Miles Bridges, if you go to Rich Paul and Rich Paul's like, I want, $28 million or something like crazy, and Detroit's going to give it to us, and it's the TNT NBC situation. Detroit comes in and says, I'm going to give him, all this money, and then you go to Charlotte and ask to match, and could Tobias Harris be the backup plan there?
Sure. I mean, I don't see why not. I think that would be a good backup plan. So Tobias Harris, we already went through the numbers with David, but again, he averaged 17 points per game. I'm trying to look up the stats here again. Yeah, he averaged 17 points per game, 6.5 rebounds, 3 assists. So just a dash of playmaking in there. And then he shot, close to 49% from the field, 35 on threes, which isn't great. It's not, it's not very good, but it's not terrible. So we've seen him shoot better from that, from distance before. Tobias, I just think the money is going to be decent because the stigma around him is so bad. Maybe it's one of these bad teams look at his stats and talk themselves into it as well. It didn't take me very long to talk myself into it. And then eventually the market gets too high for him. But Tobias is one. I'm with you, Doug. If it doesn't work out with Miles, then maybe you go after Tobias.
This would also be a slight defensive upgrade. Size, I'm not sure about. Price, I'm not sure about, but Gary Trent Jr. is an interesting name to me. Point guard depth plus defense. You look at Markelle Fultz, who's making $16-point-something million with Orlando. Again, do you want to move on from Man? Do you want to trade Man instead of Trey Man? Then he's an unrestricted free agent. Ben Shooting, you could rework Bertan's deal and figure that out. Or another name, I don't know what you think about this, a guy I loved coming out of the draft, and he shot almost 42% from three last season. I don't know that he wants to go to a contender, and that's what we always have to talk about when we talk about Hornets free agent options is who are the guys that you have to really get this fine line between finding guys that want to revive their career or just compete really hard, but they don't want to have championship aspirations. That's a really hard thing to find. So is Malik Beasley that guy? Could they add him for some bench shooting and a little bit of tenacity as well? What do you think about those names?
Yeah, Malik Beasley coming off of the bench, I think that would be a totally fine move, right? Just coming in and helping you out from distance. I thought you were going to bring up Buddy Hield because I didn't know you were going to the bench.
I was going to bring up Buddy Hield. I put him in a category called Big Splash with no thoughts towards fit, but he's gettable, and he fits that bill that I just said, where it's like a guy who doesn't seem like he wants to really absolutely compete for a title. He just wants to go out there and hoop. So,
Buddy Hield, career earnings, $85 million.
Good for him.
I just lots and lots and
dinner's
lots
on him tonight, folks.
Dinner is on Buddy Hield tonight. Well, let's go. We brought this guy's name up a while back and haven't talked about him a lot since. But the Tyus Jones acquisition, and that still intrigues me. It goes back to the idea of not having a lot of guard depth. You have more now than you ever have, really, since the second iteration of this team, right? Now that you have Micic and Mann, we are going to do a profile on Mann a little bit later. But Trey Mann and Micic, they were both fun players. They both had their moments, and they deserve to be on an NBA roster. And I actually think they both deserve to be a part of a rotation. And I think even if it's bad Hornets basketball that they were able to shine, I still think if you account for that, they can go to a better team, maybe not a contender, but a better team than what the Hornets were, and still produce and still help out. Do you want to go a level higher by bringing in Tyus and paying a decent amount of money? Because Tyus Jones right now is making $14 million this season. He is the quintessential. It feels like if you asked 100 NBA fans who the best backup point guard is, it feels like Tyus Jones would be that number one answer. Yeah. And so do you just want to go get that guy and then help out if LaMelo goes down with injury? He can play with LaMelo and Brandon if you wanted to move him to 3 and play a little bit smaller. Even if Mark Williams is out there, you can still move Brandon to the 3. The Tyus Jones experiment, just go get the smart guy that can handle the basketball, that can right the ship when LaMelo's out with an injury. It sucks spending a decent amount of money on insurance rather than ceiling, Doug, but it's a smart move, right? And that's what Tyus Jones feels like to me.
Listen, you need insurance on your car. You need insurance on your home. You could forego it, but if something bad happens, then all of a sudden – but it's all about do you want to actually compete? Do you want to rebuild the house? Do you want to keep the car? Or are you just, if you're the franchise this season, are you thinking, well, listen, if we wreck the car, I'm just going to total it and we're just going to move on. That's going to be the ultimate question. Because when we're talking about dream realism, really the dream is that the Hornets actually go out there and spend some money and get this thing closer to competing. But I think the realistic thing is that they take a year to figure out, all right, can LaMelo stay healthy? Can Mark stay healthy? What does all of this mean? Because unfortunately, they didn't get that intel last season. They may still be looking for that intel. And you don't go out and spend a bunch of money on, Miles is I think a special case, but you don't go out and spend a bunch of money on a Tyus or some of these other guys that we mentioned. Beasley would probably cost a pretty penny. You don't go out and spend on those guys unless you're really serious about, trying to get into the playoffs. So we'll see. We'll see what they feel like. I'll give you one more name before we talk about Nick Richards. And it's actually kind of related to Nick Richards in that Richards and Williams can't shoot. I think they still need a shooting big. One guy who played center, probably played a little too much center for his team last season, was Danilo Gallinari, and he's making pennies right now. I think it would be a cheap ad. I actually really love this ad, whether they're going to compete or not, just to give Charles Lee an option to go 5 out that's not always Grant Williams. So Danilo Gallinari, there you go, you're shooting big.
Yeah, Gallinari hurt the Hornets last year, and there's a promo that we have for Wes and Walker where I plead to the Hornets to stop hurting me. And why are you letting Danilo Gallinari, 52-year-old Danilo Gallinari, continue to hurt me? Complete, absolute turnstile on defense, just zero resistance at all. But at least he's a shooter. So if you want to bring him on, the vet men hashtag.
That's right.
#VetMen.
Hashtag vet men.
Maybe that's some. Maybe you could bring him in. One more segment to go. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
Let's profile Nick Richards and get to the latest mock draft that Doug found somewhere in the depths of the internet. That's still to come here on LOH. Let's get back to the player profiles, Doug. Nick Richards coming up next, the backup center for the Charlotte Hornets this past season. Nick Richards, after signing a contract in the offseason that we thought might make him tradable, I think that was one of the things that we thought could be coming from, that deal. He averages almost 10 points per game, 9.7 points per game on 69.1% shooting, nice. 8 rebounds, really, really good offensive rebounder. And that's been true the last couple of years. Actually improved his defensive rebounding the last couple of seasons as well. One of these weird players where it seems like a polarizing player for Hornets fans. Defensively, he's actually really good at blocking shots too. His block percentage is way up there, but it also feels like he's out of position at times for post defense. So with Nick Richards, what do we do with this guy that is, it feels like a good backup center, good enough, but also I wouldn't be totally sad if we lost him. Does that feel about right to you?
Well, he's a good backup center. He's one of these guys that's a good backup center unless you have to depend on him to start for you for 30-plus games. You know what I'm saying? It's like he's good backup center because you're right. Out of position is sort of the thing that you can talk about when it comes to his big negatives, which is that, and the famous thing that I'll remember from last season was Steve Clifford screaming, almost having an aneurysm, screaming, Nick, set a bleeping screen, because he's just, when it comes to sort of the free flow, fast-paced mechanics of defense, more so than offense, but defense specifically, yes, he can get caught out of position. There are some, I think I did a quarter breakdown for Every Hornets Boxscore at one point, and there was a play where Nick Richards just sort of forgets what side of the court to be on a pick and roll play and just gets caught completely guarding no one. And so there are moments like that. Now, when he's in drop coverage, which is not very often because they didn't really employ that a lot last season, when he's in that, like, he's a decent rim protector. Like, he's not afraid to put a body on a body. You mentioned the defensive rebounding improvements. I definitely noticed that. In terms of being an offensive player, They don't run a lot of stuff for him. They don't run a lot of stuff for Mark. It's just like the center position offensively is not very important to the Charlotte Hornets, so they're really janitor duties. It's cleanup duties, and so points per shot attempt is going to be really high for Nick Richards. Usage is going to be really low. I don't expect that to change. I think that who Nick Richards is essentially baked in at this point, and so the question for the Hornets is moving forward, are you settled on that as your backup center? Are you settled on Mark Williams staying healthy enough where Nick Richards doesn't have to start 30-plus games for you? Or do you see some value in his contract and the tradability of it to maybe upgrade that position or upgrade some other position?
Yeah, it's $5 million a year for the next 2 seasons. This last year was the first year of his new deal that he signed in the previous offseason. 2025, 2026. It's not even guaranteed. And so the contract is super tradable. It's actually a pretty nice piece of business by the previous regime. Last thing I'll say with Nick, just one, kudos to him, because Nick Richards is a guy that you can see growth, I think, every year. Yeah. And that's what, when we talk about guys improving on an escalator and that not always being the case, it did seem pretty linear with him. And so good for him to he deserves to be on a roster. And if he's back with the Hornets, I'm fine with that. You go to Cleaning the Glass, Doug. It's a site we go to often. Mm-hmm. One thing he's very good at is getting fouled on his shots. Mm-hmm. And so if you look at the last 3 years, when it comes to the percentage of a player's shot attempts that he was fouled on amongst all of the bigs in the NBA, 3 years ago, he was in the 89th percentile. 2 years ago, he was in the 99th percentile. This past season, he was in the 94th percentile. I think that goes hand in hand with him being such a good offensive rebounder and not being scared of the moment, going back up strong and trying to dunk it, trying to finish. Yeah. And then people are slapping down because now once you get the offensive rebound, that disorganizes the defense more. And now they're just trying to stop you because you have the basketball right in point blank range where they're trying to keep you from. And so now they're doing everything they can to keep you from scoring. And that is a skill that is going to be valuable when things get bogged down. The offense comes a little stagnant and okay, he just saved an offensive possession, and then he goes to the foul line and he's a fine enough free throw shooter. He's completely average at that spot. So yeah, like he can save you a couple of different offense. He's almost like this surprise saver. Okay, it's like when the computer screen goes to save mode and you didn't expect it. That's what Nick Richards is. He's coming in defensively and, okay, you just blocked a shot. I didn't expect you to do that because you were out of position, but fantastic. Offensively, okay, you just grabbed an impressive offensive rebound. Didn't expect you to grab it and then put it up for a bucket or go to the foul line, but that was nice. He's a surprise saver, Doug, and that's what I appreciate about his game.
Yeah, and honestly, like if this were 1998, he'd probably be like an all-star center. Like just the way he rebounds and the way he scores, I think it'd be great. The problem is, like, if he could just pass a little bit, you know what I'm saying? Like if he could just be in better position on defense a little bit, but the things that today's modern game asks of bigs, if he could just shoot a little bit outside, the things that all of the modern game asks of bigs, he really doesn't do well at all. It's the other things that he is super exceptional at, and that's sort of the kind of problem that you run into with Nick Richards and a lot of, I think, bigs that are just slightly behind the curve of where the modern game is.
Mock draft time?
Let's do it. Mock drafts.
All right.
Got one.
What you got?
That was a good discussion on Nick Richards. I feel satisfied by that discussion.
I'm
not titillated. I'm satisfied. There's a difference between being titillated and satisfied. I'm satisfied.
You feel at peace. When you're titillated, you are bonkers. You're going all over the place. But you feel very at peace and at ease with the Nick Richards
That's
discussion.
right. I feel titillated when Jonathan Wasserman of Bleacher Report adds a new mock draft, and he titles it Bronny James Makes the Cut in our full 2-round predictions. People know what gets clicks right now, and it is Bronny James. Well, I'll tell you where he lands. I'm going to have to do some scrolling. But he actually has Zachary Risacher going number 1 to the Atlanta Hawks. Some stuff building there for Risacher. So that means Sarr drops down to 2 for the Wizards. Reed Shepherd going 3 to the Houston Rockets. Nikola Topic going 4 to the Spurs. Number 5, get this, Detroit Pistons. He has Cody Williams going number 5 and writes, that Cody Williams has been trending in NBA conversations after his workouts and pro days. Some believe he's the most likely to go earlier than expected. So that leaves a lot of options for the Hornets right now. They could go Klingon, Connect. They could go Castle, obviously. They could go Ron Holland. And Wasserman ends up with the Charlotte Hornets taking Donovan Clingan. He writes, even with a healthy Mark Williams, Donovan Clingan may look like the best player available who's tough to pass up for the Charlotte Hornets. He could also look like an enticing trade-up target for other teams that didn't think he'd make it outside the top 5. With Williams and Clingan, the Hornets could lock themselves into 48 minutes of rim protection to help change the team's identity. Clingan also gives Charlotte insurance, as Williams only played 62 games in 2 seasons. What do you think, Clingan?
Well, the Klingon being there and being a valuable player, now the question becomes, do you want Klingon at 6, or would you rather trade with somebody that desperately wants him to move up? Like, I wonder if that's something that could happen for the Hornets there. By the way, this is with Stephon Castle still on the board, so another interesting thing.
That's right. He has Castle dropping to the Spurs at 8. He doesn't have Holland going until 10 to the Utah Jazz. Buzelis drops all the way down to 11. If you're asking me the question that you just sort of posed rhetorically to the audience, I would say I would rather the Hornets, if somebody was really thirsty for Klingan, I would rather them explore the trade option because the fit isn't quite there. But if there were no trade options available that were tasty enough, then I would be fine with them taking Klingan. And because I just totally fully reject this idea that you don't take a center because of Mark Williams. Because how can you watch the past few years of Charlotte Hornets basketball at the center position and not say that adding talent there should be a priority? Maybe it's not the top priority because of Mark Williams, but it should absolutely be a priority if the opportunity is there. And now I'm going to scroll and find out where Bronny James. Actually, I could just do a little Command F here and find out where Bronny James is going.
We were teetering on titillating. Felt like starting to get titillating a little bit.
All right, I'm still searching. Oh, okay. Well, this is not a shock. He's got them going 55 to the Los Angeles Lakers, Bronny James. So now this is a full two-round mock, so I can actually give you, scrolling, and actually give you the Hornets' second round selection, scrolling up to the Hornets.
The rare 42nd pick.
Yeah, who they would have an opportunity to take Bronny James, but they don't. They take someone, a Belgian Serbian, who has a pro comparison to Tobias Harris. His name is Nikola Jurisic. Jurisic is going to be the attempt that I make. He's been putting big numbers overseas, according to Wasserman, but it was more comforting for teams to see his scoring versatility come alive against projected second-round picks at the Combine. He converted jumpers, finishes, passes in a variety of ways while playing with some visible confidence. He is a small forward, 6'7", 209, and he is a 20-year-old. Nikola Jurisic.
Okay, we'll end on that. That'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. And again, we're free and available anywhere you get your pods. There's Doug Branson's Substack on the page if you're watching on YouTube, everyhornetsboxscore.com. And then you can listen to me, Walker Mail, every weekday on Wes and Walker from 12 to 3 p.m. Sports Radio 92.7 WFNZ. We'll be back with you tomorrow. We'll be back with you, I guess, on Monday. Man, yeah, crazy. The week snuck up on me. Have a great weekend. We'll be back with you Monday.
It's about time the Hornets had a Nikola.